I think my mic is on. I hope you can hear. It's a delight to be with you again. We appreciate very much the presence of each one as we continue in this series on marriage and the family. We're looking at lessons that we hope will be helpful in enriching our married life. We come to a lesson tonight that we call Making Marriage Last, and as Sean pointed out, marriage is a marathon. Marriage is intended to be until death do you part. Now, love and commitment are important in any relationship, and especially in the marriage relationship, and we've talked about that. But love and commitment are not enough. We need to work at making our marriage vibrant, rich, and satisfying and rewarding. When we come to the marriage relationship, and we said last night that the average age for women to marry is somewhere around 25, 26 years of age. If you stop and think about that, a couple comes in for pre-marriage counseling, and let's say they're both 25 years of age. And we begin talking about marriage lasting until death do you part. Now, what's the average lifespan in America these days? It's something a little over 75. So if we just take that as a figure, that means if you marry when you're 25 and you live to be the average age, your marriage is going to last 50 years. That's half a century. And for a young couple to, sit and think about that for a moment, that's a long time. I mentioned last night when my father passed away that Mom and Dad had been married almost 73 years. That's 3/4 of a century, nearly. So marriage is a long-term commitment. And we want to look at some things that help make marriage last, because marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. Here's a fellow that's running. This is what we call cross country. That's a long race. When I was in high school, I was not very interested in track, especially not cross country. Played football and tennis. They're rather fast-paced sports. People lose patience. How many people go out and watch a cross-country meet? Not very many. Now, how many are in the stands on a Friday night football game? You see the difference? It's a fast-paced thing. We're living in an age where everything is pretty well capsuled in 30 minutes. You've got these sitcoms. If you've got a murder mystery, sometimes it takes a whole hour, sometimes an hour and a half, but everything gets wrapped up in a pretty quick fashion. But marriage is not that way. Marriage is a marathon. Now, the ancient marathon, remember, started in Greece? 26 miles. That was the standard marathon. I can't even begin to think about my running 26 miles. Running a mile will kill me. But 26 miles? Now, some people, when they start thinking about marriage in those terms, scared to death. Well, what happens in marriage? Over a period of time, things, people sort of settle into routines and things sort of deteriorate. And I like Ace Reed. Here's the old boy sitting there reading his paper. The wife is over here at the sink. She's got a crying baby underneath the wash water, and crying kid tugging at her. And he says, "What do you mean you think the magic has gone out of our marriage?" Well, yeah, sometimes the magic sort of fades away, and sometimes rather quickly. I like Herman. He's one of my favorite cartoonists. He was very romantic when we first got married, but you know how they change. And of course, she's a lovely creature. One of my favorites is where she's standing there in her wedding gown, and Herman is standing over there talking to one of his friends, and he says, "We've been married only 6 months, and already she wants a new dress." We have a way of letting things sort of go to pot, if we can use that term. Those who have studied the subject, and I've gotten most of this material from Norm Wright in his book, The Secrets of a Lasting Marriage. He discusses 3 types of couples. And I want you to think about these 3 types of couples, and we'll sort of use them as models to guide us in thinking of which type of couple would be a stable relationship. You have validating couples, volatile couples, and avoidant couples. All right? Validating couples. When we talk about validating, these are people who are very sensitive, they're very attentive to one another. They seem to work together well, they share. It's kind of whatever you seem to think, honey, just suits me just fine. They seldom argue. There's a rather a mellowness in their relationship, and they don't get into many arguments. There's not a lot of confrontation in their relationship. They don't allow distance to come between them. Now, volatile couples are quite the opposite. They're intense and they're passionate. They play hard. They are intense in everything that they attempt. They fight hard. When they get into an argument, they're in it to win it. So there's a constant confrontation in the volatile couples. Now, they may be very affectionate. They may be very passionate. But there is always some kind of a conflict, and I love this little cartoon. For heaven's sake, Patsy, put down that cliche. When you had your wedding shower, how many of you got a rolling pin? I don't know if those are still in vogue anymore or not. I haven't seen a rolling pin in some time. Now, my wife still has a rolling pin, but she's never used it in the fashion that Patsy has here. Personally, when I do pies, I don't like to mess with flour and rolling pins and all that. I like to go to the store and get those ready-made crusts, and it's all done. But then I'm not known as a gourmet chef either. Well, 3 types of couples: validating couples, volatile couples, and now the avoidant couple. Avoidant couples have a mellowness in their relationship. Now, they avoid talking about problems, and they rarely get into an argument because they won't confront anything. They just seem to think that problems are going to sort of solve themselves, or if we wait long enough, maybe it'll just go away. And so they avoid confrontation. Now, I've had couples in all 3 of these categories in counseling. Of course, I have a man in counseling now who fits this category. He and his wife are avoidant. If they didn't avoid talking to one another, they would probably fit in the volatile category. But they've learned over 20 plus years of marriage that if they want to not have a lot of conflict, then they just don't talk about their problems. And so, they live under the same roof, but there's very little communication between the two. And we sometimes call these people married singles. They're married, but he goes his way and she goes hers. They sometimes have a meal together, and they might talk about the meal or something that happened during the day, but very little conversation. Well, this little cartoon, I don't know if you can read this or not, but here's this couple sitting on the couch, and he's ripping up a pillow, and he says, "Really, don't feel bad about throwing out my entire baseball card collection. I'm sure it was a mistake. Besides, they're only pieces of paper." And she says, "Well, I feel the same way about your calling my mother a parasite-ridden warthog. I'm sure you meant it as a term of affection." Well, most newlyweds have a tendency to avoid conflicts. But, you know, after 20 years of marriage, when it's this way, there's something that's not right in the relationship. Well, you have these three couples, the validating couple, the volatile couple, the avoidant couple. I ask you this question: which of these is a stable relationship? And at this stage of your marriage, would you characterize your relationship as validating, volatile, or avoidant? Or perhaps it's a combination of these. Well, what about these three? What's the answer? How many would think that the validating couple would be a more stable relationship? Anyone want to vote for them? Okay, there's a few for the validating. How about the volatile couple? There's no takers on that one. It's too volatile. And what about avoidant? Is that a stable relationship? When you just avoid problems, nobody's going to vote for them. Well, what's the answer that the so-called experts come up with? Surprising answer, really. Any of these can be a stable relationship if one thing is present, and that's positive support. Even the volatile couple, even though they may argue, if they're arguing in a proper fashion, sometimes couples come in and when I have an intake form that people fill out, and there's some issues on there, and they circle constant arguments. Sometimes we talk about how you fight. You know, all couples have arguments. We don't all agree on everything, and sometimes we disagree about something. But how do we settle that? How do we argue? And I have a little worksheet that I sometimes give to couples for them to work out, called Fighting Fair. You know, it's all right to discuss something and work out a problem, but how do you do that? And if you fight dirty, you know, even in warfare, there are what we call rules of engagement. You know, according to the Geneva Convention, you know, it's okay to kill the other person, you know, kill the enemy. But you can't do it with mustard gas. You can't do it with chemical weapons. There's certain things that are, you know, forbidden. You've got rules of engagement. There are certain things that you cannot do on the battlefield. Well, certain rules involved in a Christian home. When couples call each other names, when they belittle the other person, when they bring up, past history. Like the fellow came into the preacher and said, "Preacher, last night my wife got historical." He said, "Don't you mean hysterical?" He said, "No, she got historical. She brought up everything that I've ever done." You need to deal with the problems that you're having at the time. You don't go back 20 years. Well, you know, 20 years ago you did this, this, and this. Now read 1 Corinthians 13 again. Love takes no account of evil. It doesn't keep a running account of every bad thing that the other person's done. So when you're having an argument, sometimes, you know, couples look at each other as being adversaries, and the other person's the enemy. And I've got to defeat the enemy. I've got to win this argument at all costs. And when one person begins to see that they're losing the argument, that's when they then either bring up something that's been done in the past, or they call names, they belittle the other person, because their logic is falling apart. So that's what happens. And you know, the same thing goes on in political campaigns, and we're seeing that played out before our eyes and ears every day on the radio and television. But so even the volatile couple can be a stable relationship, even the avoidant couple, if there is one thing present, and that's positive support. Now, what are we talking about positive support? Well, first of all, there needs to be 5-to-1 ratio of positive interaction to negative interaction. Now, we learned something very valuable when we found out that our son, Matthew, was mentally handicapped. And I'll talk more about him later on. But as he started through puberty, he wasn't as smart as the other kids. He wasn't able to keep up with the other kids, both socially and intellectually. So he had a difficult time. And we found out that what we were doing, of course, is we were correcting him. We could find 20 negative things for every one positive thing that he was doing, because he was always making mistakes. He was accident prone. He had a difficult time just hanging up his clothes. The fact that he's lazy, of course, has a lot to do with it too. He's 43 years old, and we still have to remind him to clean up his room, and he has to be prompted to brush his teeth. I'll call him on the phone and talk to him about his day. He works for Goodwill, and so he'd tell me what they did today at Goodwill and how things went and what he had for supper. And have you cleaned your room up, Matt? His mother was on the phone some time back and said, Matt, have you cleaned your room up? Silence on the other end of the phone. Matt, is your room clean? Silence on the other end of the phone. Matt, your room's a mess, isn't it? Well, you can't see through the phone, can you? No, but we know Matt. Have you brushed your teeth? Well, I'm going to. It's that kind of thing. Well, we would find all these negatives. And, his self-esteem was about that high. And he was so discouraged he didn't think he could do anything. Well, the matter of fact is he can do a lot of things. And when we stopped being so negative with him and started giving positive reinforcement, just the least little thing even. Matt, we like the way you're sitting quietly watching TV. Who notices that? Well, that was one positive thing. If we could just change, our attitude towards him, his attitude towards himself would change. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what happens in marriage. So often we accentuate the negative. Couples come in for counseling, and I sit and I listen to all of this claptrap about what he did, all the faults of the husband. And then the husband tells about all the bad things that she did. And then when we get all that out of the way and we tell them, all right, you just turn and face each other and hold hands, and you tell the other person 3 things that you appreciate about them. Uh-oh. Now that's a horse of a different color. Now they've got to say something positive. And if we can learn to give positive statements rather than negative. There was an old song years ago, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and don't mess with Mr. In-Between. And that's what we're talking about. Positive support, 5-to-1 ratio, at least 5-to-1. I know that there are negative things that go on in marriage, but overlook and look for the positive. Here are some scriptural keys for positive support. Look at Ephesians 4 and verse 32. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ forgave you. And just think about that. In our relationship with the Lord, what has the Lord overlooked in your life today? What has He overlooked in my life? And we need to have that kind of forgiveness with one another. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted. Now, I know these passages are written to churches. This passage is addressed to the church at Ephesus. But those New Testament letters, you got 21 letters in the New Testament written to churches or individuals, primarily to answer either doctrinal or moral arguments and to help the church to overcome doctrinal error and immorality and to correct problems. But think about this, that the congregations are made up of individuals, made up of families and of individual people. And if you take these passages into your heart and life, if you sit down as a couple and read this passage of Scripture and then ask, how can we apply this passage in the marriage relationship? All right? Be kind to one another. One of the complaints I get in counseling is that the other person is being unkind, and they say unkind and hurtful things. Well, they're violating this passage. We need to come back and look at the positive reinforcement that this passage has. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. There's some things that we must learn to forgive, to overlook, just as God in Christ forgave you. Colossians 3:12 through 14. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, call your mom and tell her all about it. Call your neighbor and tell her what a rotten guy your husband is. No, this passage says, if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. You see the positive nature of these passages. If we apply these passages in our married life, what a difference they would make. And what changes do we need to make in order to apply these passages in the marriage relationship? Well, here's a question that I got from Norm Wright. Are you a basement or a balcony person? And what do we mean by that? In our premarital counseling, I use Norm Wright's videos for some of my premarital counseling, and he has a section in there where he talks about basement and balcony persons. The basement person, that's the one who lives down in the dark, dank basement. We don't have too many basements in Texas, do we? It's because of our soil, but we used to live in Colorado, and we had a basement. It gave us a lot of extra room, but every time there was a little sprinkle, that thing filled with water. I mean, it was always filled up with water. I was thinking about making a swimming pool out of it one time, but nonetheless, basement is a dark, dank place, and basement people are your critics. They want to pull you down, and most of us have those that we come in contact with from time to time who like to criticize. We hope that we haven't married someone that's that way, and if you find yourself as a basement person, then get yourself out of the basement. Don't try to pull people down, but try to lift them up. Now, a balcony person is the one that's on the balcony, as it were, and you're looking down and you want to encourage the other person, and you're wanting to lift them up and bring them to a higher level. And so you have basement people and you have balcony people. Learn to be a balcony person and give encouragement rather than discouraging others. Here are several passages anyway. There are many passages that are passages of encouragement. Now, Acts 4 and verse 32, we're introduced to a man by the name of Joseph. We know him as Barnabas because the apostles gave him a nickname, as it were. Barnabas, meaning son of encouragement. He was a Levite of the country of Cyprus. Well, as you read the story of Barnabas, it's a thrilling account of this man's life and the encouragement that he was to the Apostle Paul, to his cousin Mark, to others that he came in contact with. You could not help but like a man by the name of Barnabas. He was an encourager, the son of encouragement. If that could only be said about us, try to emulate those in the Scriptures who are positive and upbeat people. And here is one that you could certainly strive to emulate. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 14. Now we exhort you, brethren, warn those who are unruly, comfort the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. this is a difficult passage for us to put into practice, is it not? You know any unruly brethren? Well, you need to warn those who are unruly. You need to comfort the faint-hearted. I had a man in a congregation where I was preaching several years ago who said, I don't need any comfort. I don't need to be comforted. He thought he was self-sufficient. He had everything. He was a very strong Christian. But when death comes, we all need comfort. When afflictions come, we all need comfort. When we see tragedy before our very eyes, we need comfort. Comfort the faint-hearted. Uphold the weak. Be patient with all. Well, when we put this into marriage, we apply this to our marriage relationship. We need to learn how to talk with one another, to warn those who are unruly, to comfort the faint-hearted, to uphold the weak, and to be patient. And we might underline patient because it takes a great deal of patience to make our marriages rich and rewarding and satisfying. Hebrews 3, verse 13, but exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Proverbs 12 and verse 25, anxiety in the heart of a man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. I wrote a tract recently on depression. I didn't bring those with me, but the Bible has a lot to say about depression, and there's some really good examples of those who are depressed. Anxiety in the heart of a man causes depression. And so the Bible pinpoints one of the many causes of depression, and that's anxiety. We live in a stress-filled world, and people are anxious about many things, not only the physical and financial things, but the spiritual state of the church. Paul said that he had anxiety for all of the churches. He had concern for all of the churches. Well, anxiety in the heart of a man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. And you find your mate is a little bit downcast. You recognize that perhaps there's something wrong, that something has happened perhaps. Well, then that's when you show your concern and give them a good word, a word of encouragement. Now, here is a word that will help us to make our marriages last. It's the word saturate. Saturate your marriage with Scripture. Romans chapter 12 and verse 9 says, let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to that which is good. This is a passage that I suggest for couples to read. Generally have them read the entire 12th chapter of the book of Romans. When couples come in for counseling, I often ask them about their spiritual life and about whether or not they have home Bible study, and if they get together and they read Scripture from time to time, or if they ever have any family devotionals with their children. And most of the time they say, well, no, they begin to give excuses. We don't have time, our schedules are different, and sometimes families don't even eat together. The wife gets home at one time, the husband gets home at another time. They run in the kitchen and put something in the microwave and wrap it up and jump in the car, put a couple of kids in the back seat and take off, go to the ball game or to ball practice or piano practice or whatever it might be. And so we're sort of on a treadmill, and there's no time for Bible study and for prayer. Well, I assign this passage anyway, and I say sometime during the week you sit down as a couple and you read the 12th chapter of the book of Romans. Now, just verse 9, let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. You ask the question, if we apply this passage in our marriage, how will it enrich our married life? Verse 10, be kindly affectionate to one another. Affection is so important in the marriage relationship. If we're going to have a rich, rewarding married life, affection showing affection to one another, holding hands. I have a little article called The Art of Marriage, and it was written in the 1890s. The art of marriage is remembering to hold hands, be kindly affectionate to one another. Don't lose the romance. Continue your romance after you're married. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil. Sometimes couples get into this tit for tat. You do something to me, I'm going to do something to you, and let's get even time. No, there's no place for that in the Christian life. Render to no man evil for evil. To make your marriage vibrant, we have several suggestions here that, again, I've taken from Norm Wright, that I think are important and valuable for us to think about. Show interest in your mate. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, what's going on with them? What do they do? For example, some women have no concept whatsoever of what kind of work their husband is involved in. I've read of an account of a woman that, her husband was a stockbroker, and so she decided she's going to learn something about what his occupation was. So she got her some books on economics, and she began reading up on the stock market, on the Dow Jones averages and the Standard & Poor's, and et cetera, et cetera. So one day he came in from work, and while they're sitting at the supper table, she asked, well, by the way, how was the Dow Jones today? Dow Jones, what do you know about that? Well, I've been reading up. He was thrilled to death to find out she was interested in what he was interested in. And they began a whole different line of thinking and communication because she was showing interest in her mate. Well, when you come in the evening, the first 5 minutes sets the tone for the rest of the evening. And so be positive when you come in. It's one of the things that I've always appreciated about Emily. She taught school for many years, and sometimes she would get home from school before I did. But regardless, if she was there first, when I came in, she was always at the door. Oh, I'm so glad you're home. Well, that's always been encouragement to me, and I always enjoyed that. And if couples will be positive when you come in at the end of the day, remember, the first 5 minutes sets the tone for the rest of the evening. Well, here's an example of what happens so often. Husband comes in, looks like he's been drugged behind the car for a while, and she's been through the ringer. She got those 2 kids there. Well, I don't know which one's saying which. Probably it's him. I won't tell you about my day if you won't tell me about yours. Well, if you come in grumbling and griping at the outset, it's probably the way the rest of the evening is going to go. I had a couple in counseling about 8 years ago that it was just World War III every time he walked through the door. And I talked to the kids. What's it like when Daddy comes? Oh, it's like walking on eggshells. He's gripey and complains about everything. And I talked to him about it. Well, he wasn't really angry at his wife and kids. It was at work. He had a boss that was overbearing, but he couldn't talk back at work. So when he got home, he was the king of the castle, and he came in and he told everybody how the cow ate the cabbage, and he was going to run everybody else down. He was taking his anger out on his family is really what he was doing. And so we began working on his attitude. And I asked him a very simple question, and I ask this of a lot of couples. What do you want to happen when you come home? What do you want at the end of the day when you come in from a stressful job? What do you want? Well, I just want some peace and quiet. Well, then why don't you be peaceable and why don't you be quiet, is what I tell. And if he would be quiet, if he would come in and be peaceable, and by the way, that's Romans 12:18, as much as depends on you, be at peace with all men. And I tell them, put your spouse's name in there. As much as depends on you, be at peace with, and you put your spouse's name in there. Well, to make your marriage vibrant, show interest in your mate, and show affection every day. We've talked about being affectionate one to another. It's important to show affection every day. And this isn't, a sexual thing. It's just the touch of a hand. It's a smile. And it's expressing your affection to one another. When you come in and when you are at the supper table, show affection. It's both sexual and non-sexual. Holding hands. We go out for a walk. Hold hands. And don't forget to say, I love you. I have to tell you a little story at this point. Archie Looper was a businessman on the West Coast a number of years ago. I had the privilege of knowing him for a number of years. He was a owner of several restaurants, a chain of restaurants up the California and Oregon coast called Loop's Restaurant. And he was also a Rotarian. He was in the Rotary Club, and he made motivational speeches to the Rotarians from time to time. And he would go from town to town visiting his restaurants, checking on his restaurants, and then he would attend a local Rotary Club and make his speeches. And he was speaking to a group of these young men one time, and he made this point. He said, young men, when you leave home in the morning to go to work, don't forget to say, I love you, because you never know whether you're going to ever see your wife again. You might get hit by a Mack truck as you cross the street. So remember to say, I love you. Well, he had made that speech all up and down the coast. Well, he came back to a particular Rotary Club about 6 months after he'd made that speech, and there was a young man that was in his mid-30s that came to Mr. Looper and said, Mr. Looper, I appreciate what you said the last time you were here. He said, I realized I had not been telling my wife that I loved her as much as I should. And he said, I began practicing that. And he said, it was probably about a month or two after you were here the last time. He said, I woke up one morning and my wife, who was just a little past 35 years of age, had died in her sleep, very unexpectedly. But he said, the memories are sweeter now because I know the last words she heard me say were, darling, I love you. Don't forget those words. And men like to hear them, but women especially like to hear those words, darling, I love you. So don't forget to say, I love you. And show appreciation every day. Don't take your mate for granted. Sometimes we just get lulled into thinking, like the Ace Reed cartoon. What do you mean the magic has gone out of our marriage? Look at all the things that your mate does for you, and think about those things, and show your appreciation for those things. Praise is a powerful thing, and as someone has said, that praise has the power to clean houses, cook meals, prompt almost unbelievable achievements. If we'll just learn a few words of praise. Mary Oler had this little poem. You may not sing an opera or even write a book, but if you like the food you eat, start bragging on the cook. It's a pretty good little rhyme. Just think about it. Now, years ago, when I think our youngest daughter was in the 4th or 5th grade, Emily went back to teaching school. Now, she taught school the first 2 years we were married, then we started our family, and she stayed home taking care of the children. But when our youngest was 4th or 5th grade, she went back to teaching school, and we were in a small town, and it worked out very well because she was in school the same time the kids were. She was home, they were home, and so forth. But we got the kids together, and we said, look, it's not right for mom to have to go to school, to teach and work all day, then come home and do the housework, clean the house and do the dishes, and the laundry and all of this. So we're going to divvy up the work, and that's what we did. We divided the housework among the girls. Matt had his chores, and I got breakfast. So I could get up in the morning and cook breakfast while they were getting ready for school. They'd come in, sit down, we could eat a meal together, and then they could get out the door and go on to school. Then I could go take my shower and get ready and go on to the office, and I can be in the office at 8:30 or 9. They had to be at school at some weird hour, like 6:50. 5 minutes or 10 minutes to 7 in the morning. At any rate, that worked out pretty well. Then through the years, the kids grew up. Matt was in a board and care home. The girls went off to college. I'm still cooking breakfast. Now Matt's still in his board and care home. The girls are married. They've got their own kids, and I'm still cooking breakfast. How did that happen? Well, actually, I like it that way because then I get what I want, and I get to decide. Now, I tell all that big story to say this, that Emily always tells me, thank you for cooking breakfast. She's a little slower when I only do oatmeal. She likes the other stuff, but she always says thank you. Now, I don't know how many times through the years now, we had, our custom was every Sunday we had a nice pot roast with potatoes and carrots and all the trimmings, and we would dine sumptuously on Sunday after the morning worship, and we would leave the table, and I would go in and sit in front of the TV and watch the Cowboys. Once in a while I might think, oh, by the way, thanks, honey, for that wonderful meal. But many times, we forget. We take people for granted. And those are little things perhaps, but it's just like the salt that you put on that food. It's a very, very small thing, but it's very important. When those things are left out, then the marriage is not as rich, it's not as tasty as when you put those things in. So, if you like the food you eat, start bragging on the cook. Show appreciation. Oh, I love Blondie and Dagwood. They've been around for a long time. Blondie says, being a housewife is a thankless job as she vacuums. And of course, I identify with Dagwood. I love that afternoon nap. Well, she says, I spend all day dusting, cleaning, and vacuuming. Well, what do you have to say about that? Thank you. Well, do you have to drag it out of us, ladies? Yeah, sometimes you do. I had a preacher friend who, very interesting, colorful fellow. But, most preachers are very, let's just say that they need a lot of reaffirmation. And although he was a very well-known and excellent preacher, he needed the feedback. He needed to be told that was a good sermon. And if he didn't hear it, he would say something like, so you like that sermon? Yeah, I like that sermon. So you like my tie? He would say. Although most preachers are extroverts, they also are people who need a lot of reaffirmation. Well, make your marriage vibrant. Show interest in your mate, show affection every day, show appreciation, show concern. Well, show concern, what do we mean? Well, when you realize that there's a problem, you come in and you see perhaps that your wife or your husband has a worried look. There's something, maybe they've gotten some bad news from home. Maybe their mother or father has fallen ill or something has happened. Express concern. What's happened? How can I help you? What's going on? No one is a mind reader. Now, if you have a problem that you need to express that, because your spouse is not going to be able to, be concerned unless they know about it. So learn to show concern for one another. Empathy. Empathy is different than sympathy, isn't it? Do we have any school teachers amongst us? What's the difference in empathy and sympathy? You go over to Hallmark and you find a whole section of sympathy cards. No empathy cards. Why not? What's the difference? We express our sympathy to someone who has lost a loved one, or perhaps lost their job. We sympathize with them. Empathy takes it a step further, and that's where you desire to take their pain and their hurt on yourself. It's really a step higher, and showing empathy is a little different than sympathy. Put yourself in your mate's position, and this is the desire to take the hurt on yourself. I think the best example I can think of is when we first found out that our son Matthew was mentally handicapped. He was in, I think, first grade for the second time, and they finally got around to testing. Now, we knew that he was slow. We knew that he wasn't as capable as the other children. He didn't have the same motor skills. And so finally, after they got through testing, the counselor called us in, and this very cold counselor looked across the desk at us and just in a very matter-of-fact and cold way said, "Well, your son's retarded." Well, you know, the manner in which it was done was like someone, you know, taking a knife and sticking it in your stomach and twisting it a little bit. Now, Emily was really concerned about me and how I would take that, and I was concerned about her and the pain that was going to cause her. And so we talked about that, and it helped us to realize that we were concerned about each other. So be there for your mate, and don't hesitate to talk about those painful and hurtful things, because that helps the communication process, and it helps to relieve that problem. Now, here's a picture of Matt. He has his picture, by the way, on the side of a Goodwill truck. I hope you can see that. And we've got him standing down in front. They started that advertising campaign about 10 years ago, and he was the first one to have his picture on the side of a Goodwill truck. So the story has turned out in a rather positive fashion. Matt, through the years, has had his difficulties and his challenges, and he's challenged us in so many ways. But look at that smile. He's very happy. He's a positive and upbeat person at his group home. He has his computer. He has his stereo. He has his television, and they're all wired together. I don't know how he does it, but he downloads music off of satellite television onto his computer, burns CDs, transfers them over to his stereo and makes cassette tapes, and he gives them to everyone. They call him the music man. You tell him what kind of music you like, and he finds it, and he will make you a CD of that type of music, and that's his life. He loves to do that. We have shared our problems with Matt through the years, and that's one of the things that you have to do as a couple. You share the good things and the bad things, and you learn to be accepting. You accept your mate's deficiencies. You learn your gift and theirs. You learn to blend. We've had couples through the years that, everyone doesn't have the same abilities. For example, sometimes men do not have they're not mechanically inclined. I know couples where you don't ask the husband to change a light bulb. He'd probably electrocute himself. It's the wife who changes the furnace filters. It's the wife who repairs the barbecue when it's broken. Now, he does other things, but sometimes the wife is the one that has those things. Now, our daughter is like that. That she married a wonderful Christian man, but and Randy doesn't know, a Phillips screwdriver from a monkey wrench. He wasn't brought up that way. Now, Sarah, on the other hand, has her own little toolbox. She has all of her tools. I taught her well. I'm not a great mechanic, but I taught her to do certain things. So if they need something installed, like, they had I think somebody gave them a radio CD player that attaches up underneath the cabinet in the kitchen. She's the one that installed that. She's got her little electric screwdriver and a little drill, and she goes in and she puts those things in. When the bathroom needs painting, she's the one that paints it. Now, Randy does other things. They've learned to blend, and couples need to learn to blend. You don't all have the same skills. We all have certain things that we can do, and we need to learn that we're not in competition with the other person. And sometimes the man isn't the one that does the mechanic work. But you learn your gifts, you learn theirs, and you learn to blend. And then learn to have a sense of humor. Don't take yourself so seriously. You learn to laugh together. Learn to laugh with each other, not at each other. Be a person who's special to be with. Just try to be the best person that you can be. And then everything will fall into its place. Remember the good times and the bad times. There are always times of difficulty and tragedy that come in everyone's life. That's normal. Remember also the good times. And keep those good times in mind. And, you've seen those commercials, the Kodak moment. Well, keep the family album and bring that out from time to time. And remember those good times as well as the bad times. Share the joy. Share your happiness. When something good happens, you get a promotion at work, of course, share the joy and be happy for the other person. Now, envy is that bad feeling you have in the pit of your stomach when someone else is elevated. If that's the way you feel when your spouse is praised at work or has a promotion, beware of envy. But learn to share your happiness and don't lose those memories and share them often. Share the sadness. There's always tragedy in life, but you live through the tough times. And as you look back on the tough times, you'll find that those things are the things that make you stronger for the future. So make your marriage vibrant. Now here are 9 things that we've mentioned somewhat briefly. If you don't have these all down, I'll put them back up again later. But from this list, which of the qualities of affirmation does your mate have? Rank the top 5. And there they are again. You might mentally just rank the top 5. All right, from this list, which of the qualities of affirmation does your mate have? And do the same for yourself. What positive affirmation do you have? Rank the top 5. Just mentally think about those. And where you find deficiencies, then do what you can to fill those in. Remember that marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. A lasting relationship requires work, and there is no time to stop working on your marriage. Doesn't matter how many years you've been married. Continue to work on that relationship. Marriage is not only marrying the right partner, but it is being the right partner. Well, that's the end of this session. Our next session will deal with some communication principles, a lesson that we call Are You Listening? We'll have a little intermission here, about 15 minutes, and back and have some refreshments, and then we'll be back in, and then we'll finish up by the top of the hour. You are dismissed.